to call the meeting to order.
All right, we are now, the meeting's in order. And the first item is?
Let's go to the next slide, Joe. Public comments.
Anybody? Seeing none, we'll go to the next. Okay. Can I call for a vote on the meeting minutes? All in favor of accept, well, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. We're done with the minutes. Okay, Joe, why don't you go through I'm going to turn it over to Joe Senefani, our partner for our audit firm, to walk us through the reports. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
And if you'd introduce your team as well, if there's others on here.
All right. Yes, I have Catherine Patton also here. She'll do the second part of the presentation, but I'll start it off.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So the agenda, the next slide is we're going to talk about some 2023 highlights. We'll talk about the financial statements themselves at a high level, provide the required communications, and then some future considerations. You know, what's GASB up to now. As far as the highlights, just different presentation, depreciation, amortization expenses presented on the financial statements this year as a separate item. This was partially in reaction to a GFOA recommendation. There's no federal single audit this year. It wasn't necessary because expenditures of federal funds was below the $750,000. That's just different. Last year you did have the federal single audit. For GASB 96 software subscriptions, it was effective for this year, but after review of what Green Bank actually has, it was determined that implementing the standard is not material. So it was implemented, but there was really no impact after our evaluation on the financial statements. And then the last thing on that, just we had, as far as the recommendations go, the recommendations that we had last year were addressed, so there's no recommendations for this year. Great.
Joe, there was nothing found this year as compared to last year. So things that were found last year were corrected, and there was no additional findings this year. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That's good news.
Everybody was very proactive with our recommendations, so that's what we like to see. Makes our job easier too. All right. So the financial statement highlights, the opinion on the financials are on pages 8 to 10. It's an unmodified opinion, which is the goal for the audit. The section headings, again, just as a reminder, talk about the level of our responsibility. The RSI, we have limited responsibility. The other information, introductory section, statistical section, and then the non-financial statistics, we have no responsibility for the information in those sections. Using the management discussion analysis to kind of talk about the financials. Again, it's a good executive summary of the financial highlights. So I always recommend, if you don't read anything else, everyone at least read that to get a feeling of what happened during the year and the changes as compared to the prior year. So some of the highlights is total net position increased $30.3 million to $141.4. Prior year increase was $21.8 million. So you improved upon that. The big picture drivers, our operating revenues were increased by $3.2 million to the $64 million, and operating expenses decreased by $3.6 million to $32.2. On the next slide, we'll talk about a few of the items that drove each of those. So on the revenue side, there was an increase in rec sales, and this is on the chart on page 15 in the MD&A, if you wanted to follow these numbers. So increase in rec sales of 3.8, decrease in our GGI auction proceeds of 2.4 million, and an increase in energy system sales of 0.9 million. So that's the majority of the revenue increase, the 3.2. On the expense side, increase in provision For loan losses of 5.1, the decrease in grants and incentives of the 8.3, and a decrease in program and administration costs of about $1 million.
Joe, the increase in loan loss provision, what drove that? That's a pretty high number.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if
That's mostly that we did have more loans on the balance sheet this year. We're using basically the same percentages that we've had year over year. And
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. Was it's basically a mathematical calculation
yes,
for the provision versus a specific amount of loan losses. Is that correct? I just want to
Yeah.
make sure.
yes, it is definitely mathematical. If we had information that there was a particular loan that needed a higher reserve, then we would spike that one out. But at this point, everything is mathematical, just percentages.
Jane,
Right.
it's Dan. Can I jump in?
Yeah. Go
Hey,
ahead.
Dan Smith here. Last year in fiscal 22, we also took down some COVID reserves that ended up not being needed. So last year's balance was actually a
Deflated.
recovery. It was negative, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Good.
that's
So
most
it's
of the
not-
driver.
So I shouldn't read anything into this relative our risk other than we had more outstanding in loans, and the variance from a year to year was due to a let's say an outlier of the last year of what that was like. Is that a fair enough statement?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted, but that just caught my eye.
all right, then the last slide is just giving you a perspective of the last 5 years. So you see your operating revenues have grown pretty consistently to a total of 17.1 million since 2019. So obviously a good positive trend. All right, I'll turn over to Catherine to finish it up.
Talk about our required communications to those charged with governance. A couple of the items we talk about in our letter are the estimates that are significant to the financial statements and susceptible to change. Those estimates include the net pension and OPEB liabilities, the allowance for uncollectible accounts, and the asset retirement obligation. And we found that the key factors and assumptions in those estimates were reasonable. We're also required to communicate that disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We will be requesting management representation. We are independent of Green Bank, and we also report on a past adjustment of $200,761. That past adjustment is to remove deferred financing fees and the related accumulated amortization on SL2's financial statements. Those are on there because of FASB accounting, but for GASB accounting, they would be removed. And then we'll take a look.
One item on communications, just I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. There was a letter or an email that went out from the firm to members of the Green Bank, and the way the title of the email caused concern. It was, when I read the letter, it was just kind of a general representation letter that none of us knew of any incidences of fraud or the like, but the way that the phrasing of the letter almost sounded as though someone was bringing up some type of incident, which in fact they weren't. So I would just ask, as we go forward, if we be careful with the phrasing of the title of the email, because it caused some palpitations when that went out. I don't know, Lonnie, as chair, if you have anything you want to say on that.
Well, as a former investigative news reporter, when I get something with the subject line is fraud, oh my God. Yeah, so exactly. And also, for public record purposes, if, press or something are trying to look at stuff, you just want to be very careful about things like that draw that kind of attention. But I think, Jane, we've talked about that. And I think going forward, I also think it's important for the board to know that we're going to be asked, because we've got better accounting procedures and more complicated, as I understand it. So we're going to be asked to kind of deal with some of these other, elements going forward.
Yeah, in prior years with prior firms, they actually made me send that communication and copy them on it so that they knew it actually had gone out to the board. So I'll just make sure that from Joe and Catherine, I can get a heads up that it's going out, and I'll warn you guys that it is a standard audit communication. And you won't have to worry.
Yeah, no,
Good.
appreciate that. Thank you.
But also, you know, have them be advised of the subject line. You know, that
Yes.
subject line is, that will draw the press. Anybody who's sort of interested in probing stuff, I mean, that would draw them, and that would be a waste of everybody's time as they called and tried to find out what was going on. So good.
And now we'll take a look at some future considerations. GASB 100 will be effective for fiscal year 2024. This statement is on accounting for changes in error corrections. Essentially, it requires that changes in accounting principles and error corrections be reported retroactively by restating prior periods. Changes to or within the financial reporting entity be reported by adjusting beginning. Yep. By adjusting beginning balances of the current period, and changes in accounting estimates be reported prospectively by recognizing the change in the current period. So this would only be relevant to you if you have any accounting changes or error corrections or any changes to the financial reporting entity. So that will determine if there will be any effect next year. And the next one is GASB 101 on compensated absences. This will be effective in fiscal year 2025. This requires that liabilities for compensated absences be recognized for leave that has not been used and for leave that has been used but not yet paid in cash or settled through non-cash means. A liability should be recognized for leave that has not been used if the leave is attributable to services already rendered, the leave accumulates, and the leave is more likely than not to be used for time off or otherwise paid in cash or settled through non-cash means. So we haven't fully evaluated this, but we don't expect there to be a significant change as you do have compensated absences currently recorded.
We are, so for us, we already have things like a vacation accrual up on the balance sheet. So this would not be a change in accounting methodology for us year over year. Is that correct, Catherine?
Correct. I think we'll just take a look and make sure it's in line with the new standard, but I don't foresee it being anything significant.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And I think that brings us to questions.
So I'll open it up to the board for any questions. Lonnie or Matt? Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I've got a couple if you don't mind then. From our side, how did we think the audit went? I'd just like to do a post-mortem and understand, was it a smooth process? Are we improving year over year? I know the results were great and I congratulate you on that. That's not an easy feat. I just want to know, how did we find the process? Just candid answers from both sides, the auditors and the team.
From the Green Bank side, it's a lot of work, but it did go smoothly. We have an extra staff on board who was able to tackle a lot of the questions. We still have a couple procedural things for large files, whether it's better to put them on the share file or put them in email. We lost about a week or so because we thought we had sent something that didn't get received because it was too big to send. So we just have to watch that going forward. But procedurally, in terms of the data from our end, it was smooth. I have no complaints.
Thanks. And Joe and Catherine, from your perspectives, how did we do? How was the working relationship and all that?
It went very well. I mean, second year is a lot smoother than first year because we have some baseline perspective on the operations and how everything works and all the schedules that are prepared. So I think it clearly went smoother on our side also. You know, the Green Bank team is the most responsive client that we've ever had as far as requests. You know, we get them within hours, which is way above our average response time.
That's fantastic. How did is there anything you would recommend that we could improve on for the audit? I mean, there's always things, but is there anything that comes to mind, particularly Catherine? I know you're in the trenches there.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Like Joe said, management is so responsive, which is really nice, and it makes it a lot easier to complete the audit.
The only thing I can think of is with respect to a lot of the organization we've actually done of the financial statements led by PKF O'Connor Davies is pulling a lot of information into tables and trying making things more readable. And that's going to be something we're going to try and tackle with the MD&A next year.
That's great. That's great. Is there anything that concerns any of you that we haven't asked about? Is there anything that you're like, you know, we got to get better at this, or this is not a problem area, because if you would have highlighted it, but areas that we should be watchful for?
Yeah, I don't think anything jumps to mind. I said everything was pretty smooth. I think, you know, just one of our general comments that you kind of already referenced is just the readability. There's so much information, and the more we could put some things in tables, not just the MD&A, but the footnotes, which is kind of more of our standard approach. It just allows the reader to absorb the information much quicker.
Yeah, it's pretty dense. The documents are pretty dense and they're pretty complicated. I would agree. Okay. Well, nothing else for me. I thank you guys. I appreciate all the hard work, both from the audit firm, but it's really nice to hear those compliments about the internal accounting team. So congratulations to you guys for a job well done. I greatly appreciate it. And given my background, I completely understand what you went through. So thank you.
Thank you.
So the resolution is resolved that the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee hereby recommends to the Board of Directors for approval the proposed draft annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none?
Hey, Tom, just
Yeah.
one question. Sorry. I didn't look at a lot of this in advance, but where does our CAFCA, or whatever the right acronym, come in, where we layer on our sort of narrative report of the audit? Is that going to be added later, or is that in this annual report already?
Would someone like to answer that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The enhanced narrative we do for, you know, sort of our social mission.
Oh, the non-financial section.
Yeah, Matt, this is Brian. The non-financial statistics is included in the ACFR that was sent along.
Okay.
To Tom's point, it's a long document. It's, I think, 380 pages. I suspect 200 plus maybe pages are the social and environmental impact. You know, broadly, as we were talking about, it was a great financial year from the perspective of building balance sheet, increasing net position. All of that is important to the sustainability of the organization. You know, cash to loans, great year overall. On the social and environmental impact, we had a great year there as well. So yeah, you'd see that in that section, robust as it has been in the past. I think we've now got 12 years of data, although we report only 10 years of it. So yeah, it's back there. Super job on the social and environmental data alongside the financial data.
Yeah, and that also is the methodology is reviewed by Kestrel, and they opine that the methods and calculations that we use to create that data are sound.
Okay, thanks. Sorry,
All right.
I hadn't gotten
Anybody
to that,
else?
so thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to call this for a vote. All in favor of recommending this item?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes with all yays, no nays, no abstentions. Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
Sure, you're welcome.
Take care.
Yep,
Talk to you
bye-bye.
soon.
Yep, talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Joe and Catherine.
Thank you, guys. All right. Item number 5, the employee handbook revisions. I'm not sure who's speaking to this one, so I'll just turn it back to Brian and you can lead.
I
Here we
think Joe's gonna take us through that.
Okay.
Hi, morning, everyone. I'm Joe Bonanata. I'm on the operations team at the Connecticut Green Bank. So I will walk through a couple of proposed revisions to our employee handbook. We are revisiting some edits that were initially proposed to this committee back in May of 2023. Ultimately, we decided to pull back on presenting those to the board of directors for approval to make some additional cleanup edits, and so I'll walk you through those now. So they're kind of in two parts. First is just wording, and then the other is more specific to policies and procedures. On this section on wording, we've made some edits throughout the document. Cleanup edits replacing things like CGB with Green Bank or Connecticut Green Bank. We have replaced all references to he or he/she with they or their to align with our commitment to Be Ready, which is our diversity and equity initiative. We've updated position titles to things like referencing just president to president and CEO, or managing director of operations to vice president of operations. And then we've made some miscellaneous changes for sentence structure throughout the document. One of the notices from the last committee meeting was just ensuring that the document readability was up to par, and so I made sure I've read that 94-page handbook a couple of times, so I think we're in good shape there. And I should have noted at the beginning, so the last time we've presented and gotten edits approved to the handbook was in October of 2021. So we're now 2 years out from that last batch of edits. On the policies and procedures side, so the first is just noting that we've automated several of our processes through SharePoint. So the 2021 version, the current version of the handbook, references a lot of manual processes, which we've edited to clarify that staff will do things like request time off or put expense reports directly through our automated Microsoft SharePoint system. We've also added Juneteenth to the list of company holidays to align with the state of Connecticut holiday calendar. And then we've made proposing some amendments to our educational assistance policy. So we found that our existing cost per credit hour limit for both undergraduate and graduate courses was low. So staff who were seeking out continuing education courses were having to pay a bit out of pocket. So we've decided to propose aligning that cost per credit hour limit with the cost per credit hour of the University of Connecticut. So that way we've left it without a specific number, but just to say that as UConn adjusts their cost per credit hour limit, we will do the same for ours. So for example, our current handbook says $750 for per credit hour for a graduate course. The University of Connecticut's MBA program is $1,100 per credit hour. So we're amending that to be more in line. We're still maintaining the $10,000 per employee per calendar year limit on education assistance. So employees will still have to operate within those parameters. We're also clarifying that non-credit hour based tuition, so things like certificate programs, those can be approved, but being more explicit that these are only approved at the manager's discretion based on the relevance of the employees, based on the relevance to the employee's current position, their job responsibilities, and the promotional path. That was another piece of feedback that came out of this committee discussion back in May. So we want to be extra clear that there are, we'd only be approving tuition reimbursements for courses that are relevant to either their current position or a future position at the Green Bank.
Let's stop there. Do board
Sure.
members have any questions on this one? Any questions? Because we did have lengthy discussions over this in the past.
No, I like it. I think it's very important and focused.
Yeah. Matt, anything?
No, nothing from me.
Okay, thank you for the work on this, everybody.
Sure. The last 2 points are just, we, again, no changes to this one, but we are adding a documented benefit for employees to participate in the gyms associated with the 2 offices. So there's a gym at the Capewell Lofts here on the campus in Hartford. There's also a gym in adjacent to the Stamford office. So we would cover the costs of membership there under a certain threshold. And then the last piece is new. And so this relates to our mobile device management policy. So what this is it's an extra layer of security, IT security, but specific to mobile devices. So things like cell phones or tablets in particular. And so in partnership with our IT consultant, AdNet Technologies, we've developed this policy that they've reviewed and given their blessing to. But what we would enact is we would require, in order for an employee to use or access Greenbank data on their personal cell phone or their tablet, they would have to enroll in a mobile application called Company Portal. And what that would allow for them to do then is download things like Outlook or the SharePoint app or the Teams app and sign into those with their Greenbank credentials. Only if they have that app would they be allowed to use this moving forward. And we would document a kind of a clear rollout of timeline for all of that. But what that means is, and we want it to be very, very explicit with both the committee and then with staff, is that this keeps all of your personal data separate from company data. So the device management does not allow IT or Greenbank administrators to view someone's personal browser history, their emails, their personal documents, their contacts, their passwords or photos or their location on their personal device. So if you have your cell phone or your tablet and it has both the Outlook that you're signed into with the Greenbank and your Gmail, for example, all of those would be maintained separately. What it does allow for IT to see are the model number and serial number and operating system of the device. It allows them to reset a lost or stolen device, and I'll talk about that in just a second, and also view information collected by the apps that you're accessing Greenbank data for. Where this really came out of is kind of 2 things. So if an employee leaves or is terminated by the Greenbank, the IT would have the ability to remotely reset their any applications that have Greenbank data associated with them. So if somebody leaves or is terminated, IT would be able to wipe their Greenbank data associated from those company apps, Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, etc. They would not be able to go in and wipe their text messages or reset their Gmail or anything like that. That would all be maintained separately. It also allows gives the IT the ability to reset an entire device if it was lost or stolen. But we've been clear in the document to make sure that people know that IT would only be able to reset an entire device with written approval by the employee. So if someone leaves their phone on the train or leaves their phone somewhere and they can't find it, if they report that to IT has the ability to reset the entire phone. But always will have the ability to reset Greenbank data specifically in the event of departure or if the phone is lost. So we've piloted this with a few staff. It seems to work without issue. We would roll it out carefully to make sure that we're answering any questions. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions in a second. I'd like to commend you guys for taking this because I remember when we had this initial conversation, and this seems like a much more thoughtful solution to this. So, well done. I hope it works, and I hope the rollout goes as anticipated. So I don't know, Lonnie or Matt, if you have anything.
No, I mean, I think it makes total sense, and particularly these days, especially. Yeah. With banking systems and everything else being invaded, I think that's just really important. Have you gotten any feedback yet from various folks within our organization who know it's coming.
Joe tested it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to make sense. I guess my only question is just making sure, like, I assume this is all fine for FOI, things like that, that any communication sent, that all gets stored on a server somewhere. So
yeah. To that concern, we have an email archive, so anything that's sent is going to be kept in the cloud. And the phone is just a view into that effectively.
Okay.
Great. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay. We have resolutions here. Let me read it quickly. And then whereas pursuant to section 5.2.1 of the Connecticut Green Bank bylaws, the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee is charged with the review and approval of, and in its discretion, recommendations to the Board of Directors regarding all governance and administrative matters affecting the Green Bank, including but not limited to the Green Bank Employee Handbook. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Audit, Compliance, and Government Committee hereby recommends that the Board of the Green Bank approve of the revisions to the Green Bank Employee Handbook presented on October 10th, 2023. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, all in favor of this?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There are none, and there's no abstentions. Thank you, everybody. Well done on this. This has passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as we switch gears here for agenda item number 6 on legislative process, James, I see you there. Why don't we turn this to James DeSantos?
Good morning, everyone. I'm James DeSantos. I'm the legislative liaison to Connecticut Green Bank. I started in October of 2022, so the 2023 session was my first session with the Green Bank. The board process memo in your material it's meant to be an ever-evolving document that sort of consolidates what was done previously at the Green Bank before my time, what we implemented during the 2023 session that worked effectively, and our suggestions on areas for improvement. So we can go to the first slide here, Joe. Thank you. So very, very high level, our objectives are very clearly outlined with this slide. It is to develop a systematic process and timeline that aligns with these 4 items. It's the Connecticut legislative session deadlines, the board of directors and ACG committee meetings, so we are able to present to both boards and committees to update them on the process. There's the fall and winter, which is the preparation and then the actual session. And then the winter spring is the execution and wrap up. The goal is to engage not only board members and ACG committee members, but also the staff as a whole. It's to create greater transparency and engagement, to seek input from staff to make sure I'm personally not missing anything when I'm at the ground up at the Capitol. So there are 5 points. Joe, you can stay on the slide for a second. There's 5 points that we highlighted in the material. One is the pre-session, which is item number 1. The point of that is just to establish regularly scheduled meetings with senior staff to identify legislative priorities. In the past legislative session, we met once. We are going to up the frequency to 2 times a week now to better correspond with the public hearing schedule, which you'll see in a later slide. We're also going to be seeking recommendations from the ACG committee to present to the Green Bank Board of Directors for approval on any major legislative issues that the Green Bank is introducing. So what's important to note in this legislative document is for legislation and the process that the Green Bank is proactively pursuing. It is an attempt to try and mitigate any damage that could come from legislation that is out of our control, and to develop a process that everyone is engaged and involved so we could address it as quickly as possible. The other item we wanted to formalize was frequent and regularly scheduled outreach to legislators and state agencies. Sometimes in the past, regular outreach to DEP, PURA, OPM, Department of Ag, DOT, What was not done in the regularly scheduled manner. Therefore, some things sort of either went by the wayside or slipped through without us having the ability to comment. We're trying to assure that if something is introduced, that we're on top of it as soon as possible. Two is bill tracking. So during the legislative session, I have two separate trackers that I utilize. I have an internal one at the Green Bank, which we use for the regularly scheduled meetings. The idea is to expand the viewership of that interactive bill tracking spreadsheet to allow Green Bank staff, board of directors, ACG committee members to see what legislation is being introduced, what the impact is to the Green Bank. If there's any comments that they have or any recommendations to make the bill amenable through an amendment, that's the sort of information I will be looking for and encouraging. That we are going to open up to all staff immediately as soon as the session begins. I update that daily with my other tracker that I received directly from the Connecticut General Assembly. So in the past session, as I said, we met every Friday. So we're going to be increasing that from Mondays. We're going to be increasing that to Mondays and Fridays. And we're going to be having that with just senior staff, but we will be inviting in pertinent staff as necessary, depending on the issue. We may bring in an entire team if it's something dealing with energy storage per se. Two last items on this slide is, we will be formalizing monthly meetings with Deep in the governor's office and other legislative partners out of session, but we will be upping that frequency significantly in formalizing those meetings while the session is in session. So in 2024, that's February to May. Joe, if you could please go to slide 2. So the public hearing process, as I stated before, we're going to be increasing the frequency of the meetings to address the public hearings. When a public hearing is announced, we have 5 days to respond and prepare. So written testimony, the process is going to remain the same. It's going to be drafted by the legislative liaison and then distributed to the Green Bank officers for comments and final review. The live testimony is a new process that we're recommending to raise the issue in testimony to the chair and vice chair of the board. For a determination will then be made by the chair and vice chair to proceed as is, or for them to raise the issue to the entire board for discussion and determination. The difference between written and live testimony is soon as we submit live testimony, we are engaged in that bill. We are part of the negotiation. We are part of the process. We need to make sure that everyone is on the same page and with the same message moving forward on that. So that's why we decided to bump that up a little bit. Item number 4, very briefly, is session updates. During the legislative session, I will be giving regular updates through the board, regularly scheduled board and ACG meetings on pending legislation that directly impacts the Green Bank or our mission as a whole, or the industry or industries that we operate in. And then slide 4, Joe, could you please go to slide 4? Perfect. So this is the post session. So I hope everyone had a chance to see the legislative summary that was developed after the last legislative session. It was reviewed during a board meeting and then provided and uploaded online for everyone to see. It does incorporate every piece of legislation that passed in the General Assembly, not the legislation that was vetoed, just the ones that passed that will have an impact either directly to the Green Bank or to the industries we operate in. We are going to be beefing this up a little bit more with a more formal impact statement that will follow with the post-session summary, which will also include a little bit more detail on who was on each side of an issue. It'll be more of a research paper than it is just a listing of legislation. So that brings us to the resolution on the following page. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll open up to board members. Any questions?
Comments, Matt. I guess it's more of a comment than a question. Thanks everyone for your work on this. I think as we grow as an organization, we've progressively understood and become more sophisticated about our legislative agenda, dealing with policymakers and our sister agencies. And I think this is, just another step along that way to make sure that, we're doing it in an orderly way and avoiding unnecessary complications. My only sort of comment request is, and I think, James, I made this when we met on it, is I think it's really important before this go to the board as a whole, that it be socialized with those board members who are also sit within agencies to get their input, and that may have already been done. But, I just think we don't want to surprise anybody at the board meeting, and it's just better to have a fully formed understanding of what pressures and concerns they might have. I'm not saying those should all be addressed by accepting what the agency would like, but I think we just need to know what the sensitivities are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the other legislative agencies were required to submit to OPM on October 2nd, and I believe half of them were given extensions. So once those legislative recommendations come in, Joanna Wozniak-Brown from OPM is going to be forwarding them all over to me. So I'll have a chance to review all them and distribute internally, and we can seek comments on that as soon as possible. I do know, in fact,
Well,
that there is one
that's
issue
good. That's an
dealing with the
important.
siting of solar. Yeah.
Right, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
no,
important. But what my comment was more
Yeah.
about our board members who sit in
Okay.
agencies, not so much what their agenda is this session. What you just said is great. But just that in terms of the policy and whether that policy, whether they see any, improvements or issues as a policy, not as individual annual legislative agendas.
Right, absolutely.
I think that's well said by Matt. The other thing, this is probably more for Brian Garcia. One of the things we had talked about, particularly as it relates to financial information, remember we did kind of our communications plan as to how do we interact with the legislators? What can we tell them that they can bring back to their districts that is really, I don't want to say a higher level, but it was more easily digestible. Where do we kind of stand in that? Because that's part and parcel of this.
Excellent question, Tom. Forgive me. We're just coming back online here in Hartford. So James, we'll want to connect back in with that. We've got a set of abridged financial statements that are sent to the board on a quarterly basis that are intended to help the board communicate certain messages to legislative leaders, their appointers, and others in important positions. I'm about to send out the Q4 for FY23 report now that we've got the audit done to the board. So you and I can connect in on that and figure out how communications and engagement of the board can help with the legislative process as well. We've got it. They're a superset of really succinct, designed communications. Great point, Tom.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, Brian, sorry, one thing, sorry, Tom, one thing that made me think of actually, and maybe I should have thought of it sooner. James, the policy, is it written in a way that covers board members as well? I mean, I know this might be a sensitive subject, but I wonder if there should be some guidance. I mean, I know we all like to act autonomously, but it would be a shame to have James and his team out there, being very careful and have random board members saying different things or getting involved sort of under the appearance that they are doing it on behalf of the board. I just wonder, maybe this is something for the next interim, but something we should think about before it comes to a head.
That's a great point, Matt.
This is Lonnie. Have we had issues with that over the years?
I don't think so, Lonnie, but that's what I'm saying is, we are, I think as we develop our legislative, plans and we are being careful to avoid missteps, I guess we should think about whether there should be some guidance for directors and when and if they are sort of communicating on behalf of the Green Bank. Because, there probably are directors who wear more than one hat and may have more than one, sort of interest, and it could complicate our message as a organization. And I assume we're all very careful about that, but again, it seems like it fits on this topic, and maybe it's a whole separate something to be developed in an interim, but at least guiding principles like, if you're meeting with a legislator and it's not on behalf of the Green Bank, maybe you should be clear that you're not there in your capacity as a board member.
And Lonnie, to back up what Matt said, I don't know. I can't even remember how long I've been on the board now, but it's quite some time. And I don't know of any incidents, but realistically, I don't think, and Brian, this is no shot at anybody at the Green Bank. This is more, I don't think we were as formal in our interactions as the legislatures were trying to be now. And I think that was brought about by a few years ago when all the funds were taken out and we realized more the importance of it. So as we formalize kind of a framework and our interactions with the legislative bodies, it's probably appropriate to do, in my opinion, just what Matt recommended. And I think that's where it comes from more than a specific instance. And Brian, I don't know if you have any views.
No, I think this is great. I feel like the abridged set of financial statements that we've developed, this proposed legislative process here, and then Matt's comments on being clear about the role of board members when they're meeting with legislative leaders. Like these last two, I feel like this fiscal year, let's bring them all together, just like it, took us some time to develop the abridged financials, just so we're all like on the page and just kind of working towards that end goal. I think, it'll be good to connect the three as an element of governance. So more to-dos, James. It's
Yep,
good.
I've
got a
put
good
together another memo.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
thank me later, James.
Hey, can you guys bring up the resolution? We're back on the announcements. There you go. All right, board members, any other comments? Seeing none, the resolution before us now, therefore be it resolved that the ACG committee hereby recommends that the board approve the proposed recommendations as outlined in the proposed legislative and policy board process memo dated October 3rd, 2023. Comments, questions, concerns from board members? Seeing none, I'll call this item for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. And just as an FYI, I do have a hard stop at 9:30 for another commitment. My apologies on that. We're running a little long on this, but let's go to item number 7.
All right, I can be quick on this. Next slide. So, as the committee is well aware, the ACG committee has oversight of our impact methodologies, and we have built out an evaluation framework over the first decade of existence of the Green Bank. We have existing impact methodologies that come into 4 categories in terms of energy, societal benefit, equity and inclusion, and then economic impact. Today, I want to just talk to you about an update to our environmental impact methodologies, specifically air quality. Next slide. So, looking at the existing air quality impact methodology, we moved in 2017 to using the EPA's AVERT tool, which is the Avoided Emissions Reduction tool. It's a very high quality air dispersion model that looks at what power generation source is being offset by a specific project in a specific location coming online. or a specific region of the country coming online. So looking at that merit order dispatch and saying, hey, now that we have X amount of solar that came online in this year, what's not going to be fired up potentially because we now have another generation asset, or we've installed X amount of efficiency and reduced demand. So that last peaker plant isn't coming online, so on and so forth. When we implemented Avert originally, the Green Bank actually derived a set of factors to operationalize this, which the committee reviewed and approved. Those basically said by technology, here's how much air quality improvements we're going to see for every megawatt hour or kilowatt hour of generation comes online. EPA liked what we did so much they basically copied us and developed their own factors for everybody to use. What we're bringing to you today is to say, hey, we're no longer going to use our factors because us doing the derivation process really is time consuming. We're just going to use EPA's. It's the gold standard. And it's actually using the model as opposed to our derivation of the model. In switching to using the EPA factors, that also allows us to have factors that not just measure carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrous oxide and particulate matter, which is what we have been using by doing this update. We will also add to those measures ammonia and volatile organic compounds, so VOCs. So we'll be able to get a bigger picture of all the air quality improvements that we have. Those all then get fed into our public health model, which is also developed by EPA. And so we should be able to see a more complete picture of that impact as well. Next slide.
Hey, Eric, could I just ask that you maybe sometime give me a ring offline? And I just would love to walk through and get a better understanding of how this model incorporates the sale of, the essentially the RECs. And I know, Brian, you've explained it to me, but I always have this question. I don't want to hold us up here, but maybe just give me a ring sometime and walk me through that.
100%. We'll do that, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. So that gets us to the resolution, but before I hand it back over to Tom, any questions?
All right. Seeing none, thank you. Here's the resolution. Resolve that the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee hereby recommends to the Board of Directors for approval on its consent agenda the updated EPA AVERT model for the evaluation and measurement of the environmental impact of Green Bank supported projects, including the new pollutants. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, I'll call this for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no updates on this, Brian, I guess. But this was just in here to say that we asked about this item, is that right?
That's correct. We can move to agenda item 9. Great.
9.
Next slide, Joe. Just a quick update. So per the statute, we have 12 members of the board, some that are appointed by respective legislative leaders and the governor, as well as several who serve in an ex officio capacity. This is an update in terms of where we stand. We know that Mayor Hoydick resigned earlier at the latter part of fiscal year 2023. She's doing great. She's now becoming, I think, the chair of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. I serve with her on Sustainable Connecticut. So we do have an open position there, which is for the minority leader of the House. So working with Brian, and Lonnie, we will come back to some recommendations there. You can see a number of board members are in that position of, until a successor has been appointed. So there's some work there just in terms of conferring the end date to their appointments, and just kind of shoring those up a bit. But this is just an update on where we are overall as a board. 11 members,
Great.
voting members currently.
So there'll be more updates as things continue, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Go to the last item. Adjournment. Any board member have any questions, comments on this or any other items? Look at that. We brought it in on time. We landed the plane. All right. Thank you, everybody. May I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned, everybody. Thank you. Enjoy the rest
Thanks,
of your day.
everybody. Good work.
Have a
Good
great
job.
week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.